Blessings, good evening to you all. When staying in a monastery, particularly what we call a forest monastery, where the Sangha practices keeping the Vinaya discipline that the Buddha laid down quite strictly and living very simply in the forest environment. And one of the words and the themes that you hear coming up all the time is that we are practicing to abandon kilesa. This word kilesa is translated as mental defilement, or sometimes mental affliction. And there's three main groups of kilesa: greed, anger, delusion. So three different roots for unwholesome mental states, or what we also often call craving and attachment. So kilesa are called mental defilements, afflictions, because they take away the good health and happiness of our mind when they're there, when they're present. But the Buddha pointed out that mental afflictions are not part of the mind, or they're not permanently in the mind. They're, as we say, visitors to the mind. And you can treat your mind as a sort of a vessel that's going to be, going to feel, going to experience things according to what fills up this vessel. So whether you bring the Dhamma, the good things, the Eightfold Noble Path and the qualities that the Eightfold Noble Path brings up, or you bring in the defilements, that will determine your experience of happiness and suffering at any moment in your day, in your life. So when kilesas are not present, the mind tends to be at ease. When kilesas are present, their immediate effect on the mind is to agitate, stir the mind, sometimes subtly, sometimes intensely. And as long as the causes and conditions are there for kilesas to arise, come into the mind, then that agitation and the suffering that comes from it is always possible. So the purpose of the practice is to aim for complete abandonment of kilesa. And the path, the Eightfold Noble Path, is what we cultivate on a daily basis to do that. So restraining the kilesas on the outside is what we call the practice of sila, or for a monk it's vinaya, same thing. Restraining your speech and actions so the worst aspect of the kilesas doesn't kind of fall out through your speech and actions. We practice what we call samvara, restraint of body and speech. And that's the first level or first aim in the practice, is to develop that skill and that practice of sila, whether it's 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts of a novice, or 227 precepts of a monk. It's about restraining what sometimes they call the outgoing exuberance of the mind. But it's not simply excitement and enthusiasm. In that way, it also means the very negative outward expression of our kilesas, such as harmful speech, harmful actions, physical violence, verbal abuse, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, etc. But in the monastic situation, the practice of sila or vinaya is the most refined you'll find probably in the world anywhere, because it was designed to really help train us as human beings to be mindful and aware of kilesa, and in the first instance, how it comes out in our speech, our actions, our external behavior, and put a brake on that or restrain that. So this is one reason why when we live in a monastery or even visit a monastery, it's quite peaceful, because externally people are putting effort into that practice of mindfulness, restraint, letting go of unwholesome, unskillful ways of speech and body. And so it's pleasant. But of course that isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of the story, the beginning of the practice. The reason we restrain on the outside is so that we can look inwards and learn where kilesas actually emerge from, what causes them, learn about the nature of them, the fact that they are bringing us suffering, and then to actually abandon them internally, which is a much harder task, a deeper challenge, but nevertheless, it's the way to go. If you're following the path of the Buddha, that's what we're committing to. Abandoning the kilesa on the level of body, speech, and mind. But when we practice sila or vinaya, the restraint of the patimokkha, the restraint of monastic training, then the job of training your mind to abandon kilesas becomes much easier, and we get better at it, because kilesa becomes obvious. Once you restrain it on the outside, you can see it building up on the inside of your mind. It becomes obvious, and the suffering that kilesas bring becomes more apparent. And then you have that motivation to want to abandon different kinds of kilesa: greed, anger, delusion, fear, anxiety, jealousy, stubbornness, laziness. There's many kinds of kilesa that we start to observe as we practice. But because of the practice of the sila and the vinaya, we can see kilesa at work. It makes it much more, it makes them much more apparent to us. And this is one of the advantages of living quietly in the forest in a monastery, is that you can really see your own mind much more clearly. It's not that you can't practice anywhere else in the world, of course you can, but as we all know, life in society can be very challenging, with responsibilities, duties, social relationships, personal relationships, social norms, cultural conditioning. There's plenty to deal with, as well as your own mind. In the monastery you still have all of that, but perhaps the environment is ideal or more ideal for the practice. So Ajahn Chah would used to talk about the practice in terms of eroding or scraping away kilesa through the practice every day. And the word in Thai is kat klau kilet. It's the word you might use for sort of scraping away dirt off a floor or a pot or something. When you scrape, you scratch, you erode some slime, some scum covering over something. It's the same kind of idea. These kilesas, when they come into the mind, they cover over the mind, cover over the radiance, the brightness of the mind, the peace of the mind, and we lose our happiness. So you're constantly scraping them away. And just the very image that conjures up is one of takes effort to scrape scum off a sink, say. It takes effort. It's not a pleasant job. You might get tired. You might even rub your fingers as you're scraping the scum off. You're also slightly damaging your fingers, maybe. So not necessarily an easy task. But once you've done it, it's good. You have a clean sink or whatever else you're doing. So that's the image you get, working with mental defilements, getting to the point where you can see them, recognize them, and then erode them away, scrape them away. It's not easy. It can be quite painful. It's challenging, it's tiring, it's frustrating, but it's worth it because in the end you're improving your state of mind, your life, and you're improving the world. So we have to learn how to do this on the inside so that then we can maybe go and help the rest of the world in whatever way we can. If we haven't done this job on the inside, scraped away the defilements of our own mind, then it's difficult to effectively help the world. We can, of course, do some help, but we're also acting with defilement if we still got defilements. So the Buddha encouraged someone who's ready for it to put all their effort into eroding away, reducing, abandoning their own defilements so that they can then help others better, more effectively. Living with Ajahn Chah, sometimes it's the natural tendency of meditators, both Sangha and laity. They're often always thinking and fantasizing and imagining about the more interesting part of the practice. What's it like to attain jhana, deep states of samadhi? What are the kind of psychic powers and knowledges you get from that? Reading people's minds, seeing the future, seeing past lives, all those things become quite attractive to people who are meditating a lot. Like the icing on the cake or the candy. So people love to talk about it. But he'd say, the actual practice of eroding or abandoning defilement is much more down to earth and basic than that. It's much more obvious. It may be just as simple as seeing some greed come up when you take food and working to restrain that intention to overindulge in your favorite food, or the desire just to chat and socialize and seek fun in socializing with other people that leads sometimes to confusion, distraction, even bad feelings sometimes. That's often the more ordinary kind of practice, but actually often where you're effectively seeing and working with kilesa. So people would ask Ajahn Chah, they'd say, can you read the minds of the monks that live with you? Do you know what they're thinking? Because most people believed he did, and many monks seem to have experiences which prove that as well. There's times where he did seem to know what they were thinking and bring it up in the way he talked. But he answered, he said, you don't need to have psychic powers necessarily to read someone's mind or know their mind. He says he just watches monks as they walk through the monastery and already he can tell where their mind is at. The way we walk, the way we talk, the way we look, the things we're doing already start to betray our state of mind. So he said if someone's peaceful and they walk past him, he can see that they're peaceful, they're calm. If someone's very agitated with greed or lust or anxiety or anger, it starts to show. It shows in the way they walk, what they're doing, their facial features, what they're saying, what they're talking about. These ordinary parts of our lives betray our state of mind, good or bad. So he said just seeing a monk walking along already tells you so many things. So the training is often as simple as that, being mindful of your posture. In the Satipatthana Sutta, this is how the Buddha began teaching mindfulness, and to be mindful of the posture, sitting, standing, walking, lying down. We're practicing developing mindfulness, clear comprehension in every posture, in every activity, not simply sitting meditation, but at all times. Ajahn Chah used to joke and say when he was a young monk, he thought when the Buddha said you have to have even mindfulness throughout every posture, throughout every activity, he thought maybe it means you have to divide your time up so you're in each posture equally through the day. So maybe 4 hours sitting, 4 hours walking, 4 hours standing, 4 hours lying down, for example. But of course, after a while experimenting with that, he realized it doesn't literally mean being disciplined in how much time you spend in each posture. More importantly is to know what posture you're in, what activity you're doing, and to have that clear comprehension. And you'll see many of the monastic training rules and practices that we do are bringing you to be mindful in the present moment. Your rules help us in that way. Often we don't like rules because it interrupts the flow of our kilesa. The kilesa, the mental defilements, complain a lot when we have rules and practices and schedules to follow and routines and ways of doing things. A part of the mind will complain, won't it? Say, why do I have to work now? Why do I have to eat now? Why do I have to sit meditation now when there's other desires coming up saying that they want to do something else? So he would chuckle, Ajahn Chah would chuckle when people would talk about the frustrations of the practice and their different reactions to the monastic training and say, well, this is just the kilesas complaining. And the kilesas are what we're teaching and ultimately abandoning, so we don't need to give them too much importance or take them too seriously. So you chuckle and say, oh, it's just the kilesas. When you're a bit hungry in the evening and your tummy's grumbling, rumbling and grumbling, and you're thinking, it would be nice to have a snack. Well, that's just the kilesas grumbling. Or you're sitting alone in your hut thinking, oh, it'd be nice to watch a movie or do something, play a video game or something. That's just the voice of the kilesas, not getting what they want. Or maybe when someone tells you to do a job that you don't particularly want to do, like cleaning the toilets or something that you don't really want to do, your kilesas will start complaining internally and saying, oh, why do I have to do this job? Why can't they do it? Or whatever. So you get used to this experience, the voice of the kilesas, and the only way to deal with it is bring up mindfulness and recognize what's going on, and then bring in some wisdom and understanding to deal with it and correctly. And one of the ways we deal with things is we learn to contemplate, use this mind. As we're becoming mindful of our posture, our activity, we are also contemplating what's going on, so we have a clear understanding. The word in Pali is manasikara. It's like reflection or contemplation. So this is why we chant, wisely reflecting I eat alms food, wisely reflecting I put on the robe, wisely reflecting I use my kuti, wisely reflecting I use medicines for the sick. The way to practice is develop both mindfulness and then this ability to reflect on experience. And the monastic training is supporting that. But of course, the kilesas don't like it half the time, so you have to deal with the nagging voice of kilesas complaining, wanting things to be different, wanting to get what they don't have, wanting to get rid of what they don't like. in all aspects of our daily life, isn't it? Whether it's internal feelings of tiredness or pain when you're sitting, or hunger or thirst sometimes, or the weather is too hot or too cold. Whatever it is, it can be just feelings coming up in the body, physical feelings, or it can be mental, more subtle mental experiences that are an expression of the defilements. So the desire to get things, want things, things that agree with us, and then the desire to get rid of what we don't want. Sometimes that's just quite subtle movements of the mind, mental states arising that lead to either pleasure, getting what you want. So you see that when maybe you get some pleasant food, or you have a pleasant conversation with someone, or you're sitting there and you think of something that makes you feel good, or you get what we call somanasa, the pleasure of the mind. But there's a danger there because we can attach to it. Or we get domanassa, the sadness, the irritation, the pain of the mind when we don't get what we want. Maybe we just want to go to sleep or lie down and blot out the world, but we can't yet because there's still a meeting to attend or something we have to do. So what living in a monastery does, it helps to expose our kilesas on every level, on the level of our external behavior and on the level of our internal mental activity. And the way out is to constantly be bringing up mindfulness and then reflecting, contemplating what's going on. And through time and experience in the practice, you see more and more your own mind, and you see the process of cause and effect taking place, and you can see, well, if I hold on to my irritated state of mind, I'm suffering. And the longer I hold on and indulge in those thoughts and the feelings that come with them, the more I'm going to suffer. If I can bring up enough mindfulness to let go, I start to feel better. The mind of letting go or relinquishment is a better mind state than the mind of holding on. But we have to teach ourselves to relinquish and let go. And that may be a process that takes time and constant effort. Just as the kilesas are sort of reoccurring all the time, continue to come up again and again, and are very tiresome to deal with. Just as they bring that with them, but when you practice letting go over and over again, what do you get from that? Well, you get a much better experience. The mind of letting go of kilesa is a mind that is free, peaceful, brighter, happier. And the idea is just to keep letting go until one day they don't arise again. Your mind just doesn't want to pick them up again, doesn't want to give them any energy again, doesn't give them any importance again. And that's a gradual process through a gradual training. It's a gradual training that we're doing, training in body, speech and mind, over and over again, repetitive. You could say boring, but only boring in the sense that there's not a lot to the practice in that sense. It's just recognizing kilesa and abandoning. It's not something you do in the future, when I get my practice together, then I'll do that. It's right here, right now. Whatever is arising in your mind that is unwholesome, unskillful, that's what we're abandoning right here. You may have done it in the past. You've practiced meditation in the past, practiced sila in the past, and you've abandoned certain things in the past, which is good, but that was in the past. You may have memories of that, and that can be useful to remind you what you have to do, what worked in the past, what brought you to states of peace in your meditation, the kind of effort you put forth in the past. But that's only so useful in the present, because it's a memory. You can use that knowledge and that understanding to guide you in what you're doing in the present. But any good practice you've done in the past, any relinquishment, letting go, was in the past. You have to see what's going on in the present moment. That's the place of practice. Or we're always talking about the future, what we're going to do when we get our practice together and meditate better and really sort out our lives, then I'll do it. But that's in the future. And we can't guarantee what will happen in the future. We can't guarantee we'll still be here in the future. So the place of practice is the present moment, what we're doing right now. As we're walking through the forest, as we're meditating, as we're sweeping the grounds, doing a job of work, getting up, going to sleep, washing our robes. This is all the place of practice, the field of practice, where you're bringing mindfulness to the present moment, paying attention to what you're doing physically, verbally, and then internally in the mind. What's arising? Is it wholesome? Can it be developed? Obviously you don't have to abandon wholesome states of mind, skillful states of mind. A thought of kindness and compassion can be developed. Mindfulness can be developed. Patience can be developed. Faith, confidence in the path is a very useful quality to be developed. So some things we don't need to abandon. We need to preserve them, build on them, develop them. Other things are to be abandoned. Greed, anger, delusion, stubbornness, frustration, wrong views, negative thoughts about ourselves, negative thoughts about the practice, negative thoughts about other people. There's a whole list that we're all familiar with. These are what we have to abandon. And they arise from moment to moment, so that's where we practice. If you're always planning for the future, then you'll miss the present moment. Or if you're always longing for the past or stuck in memories of the past, well, you'll miss the present moment. So the monastic training is very much bringing you to the present moment, and sometimes it's a little bit painful because you're seeing how foolish you can be. Some of the foolish thoughts we have, the foolish reactions to things we have. Sometimes we get very upset over very little things. Sometimes we get very proud of some very minor achievement and maybe build it up too much. We tend to do this all the time. But you're bringing your mind to the present moment and just seeing what's going on and then letting go and seeing the temporary nature of our moods and feelings and memories and thoughts, as well as the sensations we have to experience with this body. So things become quite clear. They're temporary, they arise, they pass away. And this is one of the insights you get over and over again from your practice. Your mood, how you feel in the course of a day. Sometimes you feel up, delighted, happy with how things are going, what you're doing, and then not long you're feeling really depressed about it all, and then feeling delighted again later. If you could keep track of the different mood swings, the mental states, the thoughts coming in and out of your mind through the day, there'll be a whole list of stuff arising, passing away. But one obvious theme that arises is that it's all impermanent, it's changing, and it goes according to causes and conditions. And this is where we get insight into the selfless nature of our mind states, this body. Everything in this world is going according to causes and conditions. So of course, sometimes things go wrong. You make a mistake, you forget something, you walk through the forest and stub your toe, you tread on ants, whatever it may be, and that brings a bit of pain, discomfort. Then you get a reaction of irritation, annoyance, anger with yourself, anger with the ants, anger with something else. But then that changes, doesn't it? When the conditions change, you move on, things change, then that irritation or annoyance can subside quite quickly. What's left is this reflection. Oh, it's not sure. One moment calm, peaceful, next moment upset, the next moment calm again. You can be walking through the forest like the other night, walking through the forest, and there's the full moon, and it's quite warm and peaceful, not much wind, so a very kind of beautiful nighttime ambience walking along, and then suddenly a deer barks right next to you in the dark. So the hairs stand up on your arms, and you say, oh, what was that? All that beautiful, peaceful ambience is shattered for a moment by a bit of anxiety. Oh, what was that? Where is it? What's going on? And then you realize, oh, it's just a deer, and the deer just trots off. And then you're back to the peaceful ambience of the evening or the night time. And you'll notice that's life, isn't it? Thoughts arise, pass away, different conditions change. And what's left is the understanding of the conditioned nature of our experience. Things arise according to causes and conditions, and then they pass away. You start eating a meal, you have excitement because you got your food for the day. You eat, you become full, and then the excitement passes because you've eaten, you've done your job. It all goes, doesn't it? But it will leave a different set of conditions. You'll notice before the meal there's some agitation because you're hungry and tired. Then you eat your meal, and afterwards, full of beans, everyone's talking happily, they've had their meal for the day. You could say they've had their hit, they got their hit, so they're high. So people tend to be much happier after the meal. But that's something to contemplate, isn't it? Why does it happen like that? You know, the effect of bringing food into an empty stomach gives you energy, gives you maybe a sugar hit, gives you a number of different experiences which prompts a happy state of mind, leads on to conversation, energy to do things, happy for a while, then maybe later in the day you get tired again as your food is digested. These are the cycles of life which are showing us how conditioned we are as human beings. And that's what you can learn about in a monastery. Yeah, it's a real place of experimenting in your life, finding out how much do you need to sleep that's enough to be healthy but not indulgent, how much you need to eat, how much do you need to engage with other people or technology or books, or how much can you meditate. You're learning about things, some things are new, aren't they? You learn about how much can I walk meditation in one go. Most people find walking meditation at first a challenge. They've never done it before, or not much. So they might only be able to walk for 20 minutes or half an hour, and then the mind is too distracted, or they feel tired in the body and they want to stop. So sometimes it's good to reflect on the teachers we've had. People like Ajahn Chah could sit or walk meditation all night long, or all day long. Some monks can walk 8 hours a day. Some monks can walk more than that even. They're rare, but 8 hours a day is already something that quite a few monks I've known in the past have been able to walk. Practicing mindfulness. Might take a few moments rest here and there, but they could walk for hours and hours. They just learned to do that to maintain strong mindfulness. There's always more we can do, and we're learning about ourselves. If we're walking meditation, why do we stop? Maybe it's just a simple thought, oh, I'm tired, I want to do something else. So sometimes Ajahn Chah used to say, at that moment when you want to stop your walking meditation or your sitting meditation, to go and sleep or do some other job or read a book or whatever, at that moment when the thought to stop comes up, just go against that particular defilement. There may be a desire there. This is eroding the defilement, and you're saying, okay, I recognize this thought, this desire, but what if I don't follow it? What if I just carry on sitting, or I just carry on walking? What will happen? So in the air of experimenting or learning about your experience, You just carry on, rather than follow the desire to stop. And you can ask questions, bring up the manasikara, the reflection. Will I die? You've been sitting for 45 minutes and then you decide, part of your mind wants to stop, but you say, no, I'm just going to sit on here. Will you die? I don't think anyone died just for sitting an extra 15 minutes or half an hour. There may be some pain to deal with, some restlessness to deal with, but if you just watch, maybe it all disappears at that very moment when you wanted to stop. Maybe that's the moment you become peaceful. Simply because you brought forth effort to abandon a defilement at that moment and you're mindful enough to do it. Or you're walking and you say, oh, I walked for half an hour, I'm tired already, I'll stop. What if you don't stop? Bring up the Dhamma to counter the defilement. So what if I don't stop? I just carry on walking for another half an hour. Will I die? Will the world end? Will I ruin my health? Maybe not. Maybe you carry on for another half an hour, you become more peaceful than before and you realize it was just a thought. It was just a mental defilement coming up and it passed away and it ended. And a lot of the daily practice we do is as simple as that. Maybe making ourselves continue with something good that we want to stop, or getting ourselves up to do the good that we need to do when we haven't even begun. Restraining the mind when you want to say something in anger, restraining your speech, restraining your eyes and your spoon when you just want to eat and indulge in the food. Maybe restraining your eyes when you want to look at somebody you find attractive, or looking for the person who's attractive, picking and choosing. All of this is what we call practice, abandoning defilement, and the opportunities to do it are there every day of our life. So living in a monastery is a chance to really learn that, to really train yourself, understand yourself better, and what you learn, you've got that kind of insight and experience that you can use for the rest of your life, over and over again. You repeat it and you deepen it. Your understanding of what the Buddha taught you deepens. So maybe I'll just leave you with these reflections tonight.
And